In the aftermath of Winnipeg's training camp, what did we learn? Well, the Jets might not be fueled by much right now, but they've got lots of heart and an upcoming crop of prospects who have all of the personality and off-ice loveliness that you'd want from a future Jets leadership group. We'll dive into all of this and so much more on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. As always, thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. But most of all, we just really love and appreciate your support. Now, like I said, tonight's episode, we're going to be focusing on a couple of things. The first one, let's talk about, the Jets training camp and some major takeaways that we've had from what was actually a pretty solid outing for Winnipeg's youngsters. I think, look, I'm not going to say that you should read too much into this. Training camp is just a place where you stretch your legs, you get some drills underway, and you get a first look at some of Winnipeg's really exciting youngsters and prospects. But all of that said, I think that there are some very interesting early things that came out. We've talked about a few of them, but let's kind of recap one of the biggest ones. I think off the ice, this is probably going to be one of the most likable and easy to root for groups of players the Jets have ever had. Whether it's McGroarty, Barlow, some of the other guys, Neaton, and a number of other prospects and players who were taking extra time to stick around and meet fans. I know Milic was for sure as well. Just a genuinely really fun group of players. And I think Winnipeg has also done a really close job of really selling the narrative of like a burgeoning brotherhood, guys that you want to root for that get along. But even if the Jets weren't selling that narrative, I kind of feel like this group of players just has the vibes. I think Winnipeg drafted very carefully in terms of personality archetypes. You can really see it in their interactions and the way that they talk about one another. There's already an early sense of camaraderie. The guys seem really close, and that's just a really positive thing to see. Should it be the only defining trait of how you draft? No, of course not. You still got to get really good players. But I think the Jets have made a very good selection in that they didn't just draft players for, personality and vibes. They also got guys who are just pretty darn good prospects in their own right. Barlow, of course, in camp showed off a venomous shot, especially that one-timer. McGroarty has really improved. I think one thing that immediately stood out to me in some of the footage is that his overall stride seems to be smoother and stronger. Now, I'm not going to say that he's going to be the kind of guy who's going to blow by opponents and beat out, one-on-one engagements with speed. I don't think that's McGroarty's game, and I don't really know that it really matters. I think the biggest thing for Rutger is just getting up to NHL caliber speed, even if it's just like average skating. I really don't think he needs to have like Nikolai Ehlers' edge work to be really good. Rutger, I think, is one of those guys who's going to live down low. I think he's a super smart player. You get the sense that, generally speaking, he just knows how to get the puck to the most dangerous areas. And I really feel like once he starts hitting the pro level, we're going to see more and more of that. He will probably go back to college for one more year and then turn pro. But after that, I really think we're going to see a very good player. It's clear that Barb, who's been doing his skating coaching, has done a fantastic job so far compared to where his stride was when it started, which was kind of slow, heavy, choppy, not very graceful. He's really, really come a long way. So I'm very excited about him. I think he's one of my most anticipated prospects. He's also one of the guys that I think is immediately labeled as a future captain, and it's really hard not to see why. I mean, the dude is lovable. He's got a great personality. He interfaces with the fans well. You know, he was sticking around chatting with kids to the point where he was like dripping with sweat after practice and was still hanging out for, 10, 15, 20 minutes, signing autographs, meeting the fans. He just has this personality that immediately grabs you in and makes you want to root for him. And that, for me, is the sign of a really fun player. You might say, well, what is his projection as an NHLer? And actually, it's looking really freaking good. I mean, this dude has just done nothing but really improve his game, and he's grown a lot since going to Michigan. I feel like, for me, he is not just a personal favorite prospect, but quite honestly, if you ranked him as number one in Winnipeg's entire system, I really think that'd be a pretty fair reflection of what you've got. Rutger just seemingly has all of the traits to be not only a fan favorite, but somebody who's also going to be a leader on the ice. So I'm pretty excited about him. I think he's a name to really watch out for. A couple of other guys that I thought were really worth spotlighting. Chibrikov, I think, had a really impressive camp. It's clear almost immediately that compared to some of the other kids, he's been playing pro hockey and he has an elite pro-level mentality already. I thought that his little shifts in footage that I was able to catch, you saw some of his deception, his speed, his really skilled edge work, his passing and vision. He seems like he's going to have a very good time with the Moose, to the point where I kind of wonder if he doesn't actually just make the Jets out of camp. I don't know that it's necessarily going to happen. I don't know that Winnipeg's going to have a spot for him, but let's just say that he does really well with the Moose. It would not shock me if Chibrikov might actually get promoted to the Jets at some point during the season, because there's going to be injuries. It's going to happen, and maybe Chibrikov is closer than we think. Already we've seen some really elite level pro instincts, so it's just it's just a question of how much is that going to translate once he gets to the Moose. I also thought Danny Zilkin also really showed off well. Zilkin, he's got the compete, the fire, and he's also got a lot of underrated skill and great edge work to marry it with a ruthlessness now down low and an ability to be a defensive pest. So I'm very excited about him. I think he's one of the players that really will start to grow on people and also has the potential to become a fan favorite. One other name that I've mentioned before that you probably want to circle is Elias Salamanson. I thought that he had a very solid camp. He's a strong two-way defender with smooth skating, great vision and passing, and I think his ability to break out with the puck is going to be something that the Jets very much rely upon in the future. I know some of you have probably had the chance to actually go to training camps. I'm jealous of you. Let me know what you saw and what really stood out to you. What was your biggest takeaway? Drop them in the comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Obviously, though, we've got some more topics, and one of them is going to be maybe not the most exciting, not the happiest of news, but also kind of, it's just a reality the Jets are going to have to deal with in trying to trademark Scheifele and Connor Hellebuyck. We'll dive into what is complicated with the trade market in just a little bit. Before we go any further, though, I do want to shout out our friends and partners at FanDuel. Take your first sweat at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets, up to $200. That's right, just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. A lot of you are probably Jays fans. Sorry, I'm an O's fan. Don't hate me. But obviously, if you were a very big Vlad fan, maybe you want to bet on the number of homers he's going to hit this year. Maybe you want to bet on the number of all-star relievers that are going to head out to the all-star game. Maybe you want to cast a bet on who you think is going to win the World Series. No matter what you want to bet on, you can do it with FanDuel, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly, because who doesn't love a little bit of instant gratification? There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode of Locked On Jets, as we are diving into, of course, Winnipeg's offseason and some things that have changed a little bit around the league. I think one of the biggest things Winnipeg is currently contending with is the fact that the market for Scheifele and Hellebuyck really isn't looking too great. Whether it's just free agent extensions or in the trade market itself, both Mark and Connor have faced a bit of an uphill battle. We just saw Alex DeBrincat get traded for Dominik Kubalik, like some sort of a 2024 first. I think that might have actually been conditional, and another lower round pick. Basically, you got spare parts for DeBrincat, who's a really good young player and somebody that, honestly, had he been interested in signing with the Jets, I would not have been upset with taking a flyer on. Was it going to happen? No. But in terms of what it says about the trade market for Scheifele, I think, if anything, it's starting to show why the Jets have really been not aggressively pursuing it and seemingly cooled off on the whole, we need to make moves this summer. If this market is that grim and it's just not looking like teams are willing to give up much in the way for especially a rental, I don't necessarily begrudge the Jets for wanting to be patient. Now, it does kind of start to narrow the timeline down a little bit, and it also makes me wonder, what is their long-term plan with Mark and Connor? I think both Helly and Scheifele are kind of at the age where I don't know that they necessarily fit Winnipeg's immediate competitive future, but say, the free agent market is looking slim, right? Helly wants a huge contract that he's not going to get because Sorokin just got, a good deal less than what Connor Hellebuyck was asking for. Scheifele is looking at a term that's probably not going to be, 6 or 7 years. He might have to settle for, a shorter term contract under 5 years. Is that something he'd be willing to sign? I really have no idea. My guess is probably not, but it might also be really hard to get a big deal. It seems like teams are getting a bit smarter, at least a little bit, with some of the early to late 30s contracts that they hand out. You don't see as many massive deals getting, strewn about. We just saw Duchesne have to sign with the Dallas Stars after getting bought out just very early on into his Nashville deal, which I think is a good sign that, teams might be reevaluating how they're doing some of these really big extensions. So Scheifele, I think, has a bit of an uphill battle, which is crazy to say because he's a super talented center. And it's very clear that when Scheifele's on, the dude is on. Make no mistake, Scheifele can be a game-breaking presence. It's just a question of whether you have him motivated at 100%. And it's not always that case. When he's on, and he's feeling like he buys into everything, again, he's unstoppable. But, you're just not really sure how much on the same page he is with the coaching staff and with the front office this year. So I don't know. I'm not Scheifele's agent. I don't talk to him. So we'll see if he's kind of coming around to the idea of what the Jets are doing. Maybe this prospect camp is going to change some hearts and minds. I really don't know. Would I be averse to signing both of them with a slight bit of term? Not necessarily. I think if Hellebuyck and Scheifele came back on, 4-year deals or something, that's not bad. Actually, I'd be okay with that. The impact of losing both is already hard enough to stomach. And the fan side of me, whether it makes sense asset-wise, the fan side would have a very hard time watching both of them leave, even if I know it's for the best. Helly especially. Scheifele, I'm more okay with departing, but Hellebuyck, I have a particularly soft spot for. So we'll see how it pans out. I don't really know what Winnipeg's plan is, but obviously I think the next few weeks the Jets are going to be patient. They're going to kind of wait for preseason to roll around and maybe start to make some determinations about how they structure this team going forward after that. But we did see that Kevin Weeks tweeted something yesterday about Hellebuyck maybe being the next goalie on the move. When Weeksy tweets something like that, it usually means that he's heard something. So maybe there is more smoke or maybe there's fire where there's some smoke, but he hasn't said anything since. So I don't know if it means New Jersey's calling, if there's a trade that's close. Hasn't really been very clear, but let's just hope that if he does get traded, that the Jets don't get robbed blind, because that would really be unfortunate for a guy who, quite honestly, has been our team's MVP for several years in the running. But I think the biggest question now is, with all of this being said, what's next for the Jets? We'll dive into a couple of major questions heading into Winnipeg's upcoming next few weeks of the offseason and whether the Jets might be done with free agency. Hello, friends, and welcome back to these closing thoughts on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for rejoining us for these final thoughts on tonight's episode of Locked On Jets. we are heading into, I guess, the backstretch of the offseason, relatively speaking. We're starting to get towards August, September, and as you roll into these months, I know it's just the start of July, but I promise you it's going to happen a lot faster than you think. And with that, Winnipeg is going to find itself with a couple of questions. The first, I guess, is who's going to be captain. I mean, I feel like we already know it's going to be like one of Lowry or Morrissey. I can't really see anyone else really being a candidate, but maybe they surprise us. Leadership aside, though, I guess I kind of wonder what the lines are going to look like for the upcoming season. We talked about some potential combos on previous episodes. I know that it's been controversial at times. Some people were happy with the lines. Some of them were really upset. I know one person was not happy that I had Lowry as a fourth line center, even though I don't really feel like that's actually an insult. I feel like you put Lowry as your 4C, you have like a really good top nine that just rolls through opponents offensively. You have Lowry as your pulverizing fourth. I think you start to see why that 2017-2018 team clicked the way it did. And you could do it again with this group. But overall, I guess for me, I kind of wonder if the Jets are done with free agency. Winnipeg really didn't make a ton of big signings. They brought back guys that I thought are really worth re-signing. I think Nemesnikov coming back is good. I think Brossoit as your backup is very solid. Is he going to be like the kind of guy that's going to supplant Hellebuyck? Probably not to the degree that, he becomes like an elite starter or anything like that. But a guy who could potentially eat, 10, 15, 20 games a season, maybe more like 20 this year, I think that would be very helpful. It is kind of interesting that he briefly talked about load management as being something that could be really important for Hellebuyck this year. I know that in the past, the Jets have really ridden Helly almost into the ground. Maybe that's going to change this year. I don't know what Winnipeg is necessarily planning in terms of their goaltending tandem, or if, in fact, they're really thinking Hellebuyck is going to be gone soon. Either way, the Jets have, I would say, added enough depth in areas to be competent, but I don't know if we're really seeing much in the way of major signings that I think are going to boost this team. It really feels like the Dubois trade was kind of their big play of the offseason. And then if Scheifele and Hellebuyck got big returns, that's when they were willing to make another splash. But so far, not really seeing it. And maybe the depressed free agent market is actually playing into Winnipeg's hands if they're planning to reapproach Scheifele and Hellebuyck with some sort of an extension offer. But I don't know. It feels weird because I feel like the Jets accomplished what they needed to accomplish, but I'm still not feeling like it's quite there for me yet. I think this team needs a couple of changes, especially on the back end. The defense, I really feel like, is mostly there, but if they add more puck moving ability, I think this team could be a lot more fun in the upcoming season. We all know that Bonus has actually talked about, at the very start of his Jets tenure, aggression from the blue line. And as the season wore on last year, he kind of got away from that, maybe realizing that this Jets blue line doesn't really have the foot speed and finesse to kind of do that stuff, especially with like passing, skating under pressure, all of that stuff. But the Jets certainly have some prospects that I think could make the jump. There are some, potential trades that they could make. Sanheim, maybe if he'd be willing to waive whatever trade protection he has, if he wants to come to Winnipeg, I don't know. I really don't, I don't speak for him, but, certainly coming back to Manitoba probably wouldn't be the worst for him. Otherwise, he gets stuck in Philadelphia, and based on some of the comments and stuff from the front office, I'm not sure I would want to hang around there much longer if I was him. Seems like they're maybe not the happiest with him. So a lot for the Jets to stew on, but so far, the offseason's been pretty vibey, I would say. Winnipeg did what it needed to, got a big trade return for Dubois. Actually, very clearly the best trade of the offseason so far. I think the Jets kind of hit it out of the ballpark based on the other trades that we're seeing, which, when the deal actually broke anyways, it kind of seemed like the Jets did really well. But especially with some of the other trades that have happened, the Dubois one is going to age really well with time. So overall, I think the Jets have done a good job. It's just kind of shoring up a few other things and really preparing the blue line for the future that I think could set up the Jets for long-term success. But let me know what you think the Jets need to do over the next few weeks. Give me your list of maybe 2 or 3 items for the Jets to tick off in the comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, though, that is all the time that we have. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. We will see you back here tomorrow with more off-season coverage and maybe even some trade talk. Thanks for listening. Have a great night, and go Jets go.